Canadian universities, McGill and Waterloo. His appointment is seen by some as a departure from his immediate predecessors, Michaël Jean and Adrienne Clarkson, both journalists. Johnston's background is law.
He has an understanding of constitutional law, which I suspect for Governor General would be a plus, and he's a highly respected individual.
People who know Johnston say he's big on education, encouraging people of all backgrounds to take it seriously.
To have opportunities in university, to participate in building the knowledge economy in Canada. And it would not surprise me at all if that's the general orientation that he took to his Governor Generalship.
But being Governor General is a meet and greet kind of job, too.
Hi there, how you doing?
A well-rounded sense of life helps. So does genuine likability. David Johnston seems to have that in spades, even appearing in a recent student rap video. And as Harvard hockey star, he inspired a character in the novel and movie Love Story. Liberal MP Irwin Cotler has been his friend for 35 years.
And you always came away from a conversation with him enriched by that conversation and also encouraged by it. Somehow he had a way of inspiring you on all levels.
Before he was sworn in, Johnston made a quick visit to Scotland to visit the Queen at Balmoral Castle and was greeted by the Queen and her husband, Prince Philip. And then, on October the 1st, the big day arrived. The CBC's Laurie Graham was there and filed this report.
As the motorcade arrived, Canadian flags waved in the wind, welcoming David Johnston and his wife Sharon. They were greeted by dignitaries and very special guests, Canadians representing each province and territory, something Johnston specifically requested.
As soon as he came up to you, it's like you have this intense feeling in you. It's just like, it's really cool. I like it.
Inside the Senate chambers, Prime Minister Stephen Harper made the introduction.
All through his life, David Johnston has been driven by the intense belief that service is not merely an option. It is a duty, an obligation of the heart that honor compels a man to accept.
You, David L. Johnston.
Today, David Johnston accepted his new duty.
I do.
Though the cameras didn't capture it, his wife bowed to him for the first time, a formality that didn't appear to be his first choice. Then he spoke to Canadians.
There is much work to be done to fully achieve our vision of a smart and caring nation. I believe it is essential to support families and children, to reinforce learning and innovation, and to encourage philanthropy and volunteerism.
The people who gathered outside came for different reasons. Some are tourists who just happen to be here. For others, it's more personal.
Vepe Percival worked with Johnston.
I was privy to his professionalism, his fairness to employees, and just the way he conducted himself. I always had great respect for him. I admired him immensely.
Sarah Brown was a student at the University of Waterloo when Johnston was president.
He was well known at Waterloo for being very visionary and progressive in his role there, and so I would expect nothing less from him in this role.
Part of his new role, Commander-in-Chief. And today, he was saluted. He broke tradition and requested a special stop. On his first day serving the nation, he paused at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier to honor those who died serving their country. He arrived at Rideau Hall in a carriage full of kids. David Johnston may be Canada's new Governor General, but he's still Grandpa to them. Laurie Graham, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Governor General also gets his personal coat of arms, and Johnston's is full of meaning. The 5 books symbolize his daughters and represent knowledge, and the candle, the transmission of that knowledge from one person to another. As for the zeros and the ones at the bottom, they represent digital communication and modern media. Although their role is mostly symbolic and ceremonial, Governor Generals can find themselves called upon to rule on some very delicate and very political questions, as Johnston's predecessor Michaël Jean was during the so-called coalition crisis in late 2008. She was asked to decide whether to allow Prime Minister Stephen Harper to prorogue or shut down Parliament, or allow his government to fall and be replaced by a Liberal NDP coalition supported by the Bloc Québécois. As the CBC's Leslie McKinnon reports, her decision to allow Parliament to be prorogued cast a shadow over her legacy, even as she said goodbye.
It's classic Michaëlle Jean. An emotional moment at Rideau Hall as she prepares to say goodbye.
Hello, I'm Michaëlle Jean.
She was a CBC journalist when Prime Minister Paul Martin plucked her out of relative obscurity. Her story as a Haitian immigrant seemed to embody the new Canada. Whether she was comforting soldiers or eating raw seal with the Inuit, Jean's finest attribute seemed to be connecting with people. By far, her most controversial moment was when Prime Minister Stephen Harper, facing defeat in the House of Commons, asked her for a prorogation of Parliament. It took Jean 2 hours to give Harper her decision.
She should have said no. She should have, in a sense, referred him back to the process, which was to meet the House, take your knocks, and if they vote against you and defeat the government, then, of course, we will then have to take it from there.
If Jean had said no, this author of a new book about Harper says the Prime Minister had another plan.
In speaking to one of his advisors, he told me one of the options on the table was to go to the Queen. In other words, you know, if the GG turned him down, the Prime Minister would appeal that decision to the Queen.
Such a claim of going anywhere beyond the Governor General or to the Queen, for example, is entirely false.
Of Jean's 40 foreign tours, it was her visit to her devastated birthplace the Canadians will likely remember.
I can feel the strength of the people. It's there.
She went to Afghanistan twice. She seemed to have a special affinity for the military. One of her final public appearances as Governor General was at Canada's War Museum this week. Michaëlle Jean couldn't have expected a prorogation crisis during her term. But both it and the Haiti earthquake thrust her into a role that Canadians had rarely seen before in a Governor General. How she handled those two events will be her legacy. Leslie McKinnon, CBC News, Ottawa.
Since the coalition crisis, the political dynamic hasn't changed. Stephen Harper's minority Conservative government could be defeated any time the opposition parties choose to do so. So the new Governor General could also be called upon to make some difficult decisions. The CBC's Peter Mansbridge met with David Johnston and asked him how he viewed his new role.
All right, let's go back to those three words. Consult, advise, warn. What do they mean to you? And I guess I ask that because when there on those few occasions where there has been public discussion about the role of the Governor General as it relates to the government of the day because of some situation, it's been, well, you know, come on, it's a rubber stamp. The Governor General has no choice but to agree to whatever the government of the day wants. So with that sort of public expectation, and yet you're suggesting those three words still mean something in today's world. What do they mean?
Well, there's another word there as well that's a very attractive one for me, and that's to encourage. And one hopes that there is a rapport between the Governor General in any jurisdiction, and bear in mind this office is quite frequently used in the parliamentary system around the world, that there will be a rapport so that there is an exchange of views, encouragement and advice between the Queen's representative as being objective and removed from politics, and those who are elected and practice politics, and those who serve in the public service. The warn part, I suspect, is a term that even in Badgett's day would have been used with great care, and it would have been reflecting, I think, a relationship that certain monarchs had with certain prime ministers and cabinets over a number of different decades. And I think those words and the advice-giving relationship to some extent would be dependent upon the government in power and who the particular Governor General is. I think in this case, I think the Prime Minister and his cabinet were in fact seeking to appoint a Governor General who would have an understanding and appreciation of those responsibilities and would be able to make some useful contribution to that dialogue.
Whether the new Governor General will ever have to deal with another parliamentary crisis remains to be seen, but most observers agree that if one does develop, few Canadians are better prepared to deal with it. And that is News in Review. Don't forget to check out our website at newsinreview.cbclearning.ca. I'm Michael Serapio. Thanks for watching. They're fighting an enemy they sometimes can't see. Fire! One that can strike without warning.
Right, because there's no enemy, you know what I mean? It's just, you know, a little sand monster that's gonna bite you when you don't know when, right?
On News in Review today, Afghanistan, a frontline report. Hello, I'm Michael Serapio. Canadian soldiers have been fighting Taliban insurgents in Afghanistan for more than 8 years. But next year, that military mission is scheduled to end. Canada has about 2,800 soldiers in Afghanistan, most of them stationed in and around the city of Kandahar. It was the birthplace of the Taliban, and over the years, the fighting has taken a bloody toll. By late October of this year, 152 soldiers had been killed, most of them by improvised explosive devices, and thousands of others had been wounded. Some progress has been achieved. Our troops have helped build roads, clinics, and schools in that impoverished country. But the Taliban are as strong as ever, and this has been the bloodiest year for the NATO-led coalition forces since the war began. To try to find out more about the challenges Canadian troops face every day, the CBC's Darryl McIntyre spent 6 days in the field with the soldiers of Delta Company. Here is his report.
This is how they often see the war. Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan are trying to spot enemy insurgents in the fields at night. They appear as little more than small white shapes in the distance, but a closer look reveals they're carrying something.
They're suspiciously walking from high feature to high feature to a tree line. Just with.
Is that by our range?
Yeah, by our range.
In the dark of night, Canadian Lieutenant Sean Vino can't figure out who is in the fields outside his camp. His concern that whoever they are, they're planting a bomb.
They would walk around with what appears to be a jug, and then shovels again, jug. Yeah. Kind of like creeping around. It's like suspicious movement, not just like I'm farming my fields kind of look.
The decision is made that it could be an insurgent threat. This is the Canadian response.
Fire!
Right on, boys, perfect.
This is the Panjwai district, where homemade bombs, IEDs, are the biggest single killer of Canadians.
Fire! Fire! Fire!
Still, without absolute proof they're planting a bomb, there's little Lieutenant Vino can do tonight but light up the night and watch. Those could be local farmers out there in their own fields at night, and making friends with the locals is NATO's top priority in Afghanistan today, even if you're not sure who those friends were friends with last night.
All right, sounds good. Let's do this.
For almost a week, cameraman Mark Robichaud and I spend days and nights with Delta Company here in the southern Afghanistan village of Nakoné. During that time, we witness how the line between friend and enemy insurgent is murky, even mysterious, and always dangerous.
Counterinsurgency is it's not the 100% the way of going and kicking in the door. It's more of the hearts and minds approach.
who we look for.
Sean Vino is one of the Canadian soldiers here on the outer front lines of a counterinsurgency tactic which they call COIN. Here's how he describes it.
If need be, we need to clear a village, we will clear a village. That's one of the steps of COIN. However, when we hold and build and enable, that's when we sit down with the elders like we have on patrol and sit down about development projects, how we can increase security in the villages and things like that.
Vino commands 12th Platoon, a small group who spends much of their 7-month tour at one of the patrol bases here, an abandoned school. They're mostly Edmonton-based Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, and their job is to be a constant NATO presence in a place that's never really had one. Till recently, Taliban soldiers lived here, and even now the Afghan government has little influence in Nakone, but Canadians mean to change that.
The philosophy of COIN is it's to secure the population, it's the population approach. So in order to be 100% with the locals, we have to live with the locals. And by increasing security in the villages, we have to live next to them. So if they have an issue, they can come to the front door and basically ask for our assistance, and we're here at a moment's notice to help them.
For these soldiers, the operation here is like any other war. Hard conditions, far from family. Daniel High sends belated greetings home to Surrey, BC.
Hey Mom, I know you won't get this. It'll be after Mother's Day, but happy Mother's Day.
And at every turn, danger is a constant presence. It's 7 a.m. 12th Platoon is getting ready to visit an elder in a nearby village.
We'll be heading out the southeast corner from Balpine, coming to the 435 Easting, heading directly south through the Great Fields as much as south as possible as we can. Down to
Their route will take them through the same fields where they watched the suspicious activity the night before, and every contingency